She sat at the far end of the glittering marble table, her hands folded, her eyes lowered. Laughter rose around her, sharp, cruel, mocking. A billionaire family ridiculed her dress, her skin, her very presence. What they didn't know was that she was the daughter of the CEO they desperately needed. And in minutes, their $750 million deal would vanish like smoke. The ballroom was dazzling, chandeliers spilling golden light across marble floors, every surface polished to a mirror sheen. At the center stretched a banquet table so long it seemed to divide the room in two. Gold-rimmed glasses sparkled in neat rows. Silver cutlery gleamed beside plates decorated with intricate patterns. Around it sat a family bred on fortune. Their voices were confident, brash, carrying the arrogance of those who had never been told no. Laughter bounced against the high ceilings, mingling with the clink of glasses and the faint melody of a string quartet in the corner. They wore wealth not just in suits and gowns, but in their very posture. Shoulders back, heads high, they carried themselves like rulers in a kingdom of their own making. Servants glided silently in the background, unnoticed, as the family indulged in food and drink, their talk dripping with the assurance that the world bent to their whims. At the far end sat a girl. She was young, maybe 12, dressed in a simple dark blue dress. Compared to the shimmering jewels and designer fabrics around her, she looked plain. Her hair was neatly tied, her manners quiet and precise, her hands folded in her lap. To any stranger, she was simply another child. But the family saw her differently. One of the sons leaned toward his cousin, his whisper cutting through the air just loud enough to be heard. Where did she even get that dress? A thrift store? The cousin stifled a laugh. Another chimed in, louder, bolder. She doesn't belong here. Look at her. She's not one of us. The laughter spread like wildfire. The girl's eyes lowered, her throat tightening. Heat flushed her cheeks. She gripped her napkin in her lap, holding it tightly so her hands would not shake. She wanted to speak, to defend herself. But her father's words echoed in her mind. Dignity is not in shouting. Dignity is in standing tall, even when they try to push you down. So she stayed silent, but the silence was not met with respect. It was met with louder laughter, crueler jokes. They laughed not just at her dress, but at her skin, her quietness, the very fact of her presence at their golden table. The chandeliers sparkled above, but to her, the light felt cold. Every word landed like a stone. Every laugh felt like a slap. Yet she sat still, her back straight, her lips pressed tightly together. Her father had always taught her, the world may not always be kind, but you must never let their cruelty define who you are. She remembered nights when he would tuck her into bed, his deep voice telling her stories, not of fairy tales, but of his own life. Stories of hunger, of being turned away, of nights spent with nothing but hope to keep him warm. He had told her how people once mocked him too, for his skin, his accent, his lack of wealth. He told her he had learned the power of silence, the strength of patience, the victory of endurance. They may laugh, my daughter, he had said, but their laughter cannot lower you. Hold your head high. Always. She clung to those words now, as laughter swelled around her. Her vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She whispered to herself, so quietly only she could hear, Daddy will come. Daddy will come. Her father's story was not written in luxury. It was written in struggle. He had grown up in a small house with cracked walls, where rain leaked through the roof and food was often scarce. He knew the sting of rejection, the cruelty of being told he was not enough. He knew what it felt like to be mocked for things he could not change. As a young man, he worked long hours at jobs no one else wanted. At night, he studied by the dim light of borrowed lamps. He faced closed doors, harsh words, and betrayal. Yet he kept moving forward. When he entered business, the world was no kinder. Investors dismissed him. Banks refused him. Competitors laughed at him, but he refused to bow. He carried silence like a shield, dignity like a weapon. Slowly, deal by deal, brick by brick, he built an empire. And when he became a billionaire, he did not forget. He vowed his children would never endure what he had. He vowed they would know dignity, even when the world tried to strip it away. That vow was why his daughter sat at this table tonight. Not because she needed to, but because he wanted her to see the world for what it was. To learn, as he had, that character matters more than jewels. The laughter grew louder, the remarks sharper. One of the uncles raised his glass, smirking. To partnerships with people who send their children in rags. The room erupted. The girl's chest tightened. Her hand clenched the fork beside her plate until her knuckles whitened. Her vision swam with tears she could no longer hold back. She whispered again, barely audible, "Daddy, please come." And then the doors opened. Heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor. The air shifted. The chandeliers seemed to dim. Silence fell like a curtain. He entered the room with quiet authority. A tall man, shoulders broad, face carved by years of endurance. He wore no crown, no jewels, yet his presence outshone every glittering ornament in the hall. The CEO. The family straightened in their seats, their arrogance faltering. They knew his name. They knew his power. And suddenly, they knew their mistake. He did not look at them first. He looked at his daughter. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, her hands clenched in silence. His jaw tightened. His heart broke. Then he turned to them. His voice was low, steady, unshakable. "You mocked my daughter, and in mocking her, you mocked me. This partnership is over." The words thundered across the room. Gasps broke the silence. Faces paled. The realization struck like a storm. $750 million. Gone in an instant. The deal they had boasted of, the deal they believed unshakable, collapsed with a single sentence. They stammered, pleaded, begged. But respect, once lost, cannot be bought back. The CEO placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, steady and protective. She looked up at him, whispering, "I knew you'd come." He led her from the table, his presence leaving behind silence thicker than marble. As the doors closed behind them, his words still rang in the air. No amount of wealth can hide the poverty of character. The chandeliers still sparkled. The glasses still shone. But laughter would never return to that room. True wealth is not measured in dollars. It is measured in dignity, in kindness, in character. The billionaires thought they had everything, but they lost everything that mattered in one night. The girl walked out, not in shame, but in honor. And that night proved a timeless truth. You never know who you are mocking until it is too late.